can't. The only way we lose is if we quit. The only way we don't have victory if we surrender. The only way that they win is we retreat. And we're not going to retreat. We're not going to surrender. We're not going to quit. Fight, fight, fight.
The new federal state offers itself as an alternative for the Chinese people. And here's the reason.
That the Chinese Communist Party is not the legitimate government of the Chinese people.
It is a transnational criminal organization that's sole purpose in life is to oppress the Chinese people.
One thing has to be paramount in our minds. Take down the CCP.
Take down the CCP!
Take down the CCP!
Take down the CCP!
Free Mao Kuo!
Free Mao Kuo!
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Steve.
Of 2020. And I had not had a haircut up until then because of the pandemic. I didn't get a haircut for a year and a half.
And then I got a haircut
the day
after the 5th, so June 5th of 2021, because when I saw myself in the film, I go, oh my God, I'm sort of like Ben Franklin. It was so over the top. And I really called someone in the middle of this because the pandemic was still going. I had to get, she had to come to the hotel and wear like 10 masks. But I said, I got to do this. I got to get the haircut. She had known me for years. She came in, she goes, oh my God, when was the last time you had a haircut? I said about a year and a half ago. And the haircut itself took like 3 hours. So thank you for reminding me.
Still very handsome.
Thank you.
Always.
Thank you.
So first of all, thank you for joining us, because as the co-founder of New Federal State of China, this marks the 5th anniversary of the establishment of our NFSC. While Mao is still unjustly returned in MDC, I would like to, but our movement, NFSC, is still going strong and growing bigger every day. So first, I would like you to give a short speech, if you can, give to our followers, whistleblower final fighters, especially the people inside China who risk their lives to deliver all the messages, intelligence to us and fight against the Chinese Communist Party. Sir.
Memories have been flooding over me. Last night when we did the traditional, do it the evening before because it's dawn in Beijing or close to morning in Beijing. It was very powerful with the footage we put together and you guys going back through the story of the young people that stood up for freedom and liberty. And I remember I heard so many of these stories from Miles because Miles was there as a first person. But then today when Ava brought up on our morning show on War Room about 5 years ago and being on the boat and everything that happened and the rain coming and then stopping and the clouds parting and the sun and the lightning, everything like that, the memories flooded back. And I thought about the journey that we've had. Miles has had a bigger impact on the United States, I think, than any person in the United States except for President Trump. And the reason was he came to warn us about what was coming out of China, what the Chinese Communist Party was doing. And then Ava's summary today, I think, was so magnificent, so brilliant, and so succinct that if you look at what this movement's done, and this is what Miles, I think, inspired. Miles taught us a different way to look at the problem. And that way, it's not about China, this ancient civilization. It's not about the Chinese people, right? Because they're the biggest victim. It's about a cadre of essentially gangsters. And we have to say they've been very smart and very cunning and very lethal. And how their rise to power and how they've stepped on the Chinese people and really destroyed Chinese civilization, particularly that internetwork of the family and the clan and everything, what they've done with one-child policy, but also just breaking down everything to the state. that our work is so important. I mean, it's central to my life. And I realized today, once again, just to reinforce it, that's why we do commemorations, that it is worthy of one's attention. It's worthy of one's committing oneself to it, whether one's on the mainland of China and suppressed, or one's in the overseas Chinese community that's part of the whistleblower movement, the new federal state, whether it's on the political side, the media side, whatever. So our struggle is long. And what was very powerful, what Ava said, all the 5 people that were, myself and Navarro and President Trump and Rudy, right? What they wanted to do was to bankrupt us all and to put us in prison, because this is the way they do it. This is the way they do it everywhere they go. So it was very, very, very powerful. And we just got to recommit ourselves on the 5th anniversary that we're going to dedicate everything we do to taking down the Chinese Communist Party and assisting Lao Beijing in their fight for freedom and liberty.
Thank you, sir. I think really it's the God will, because you are at the kind of testify what happened on that exact day when the storm stopped right after your ceremony, and how it cleared up right before the ceremony. Which is really the God willing. I think because you and President Trump, you guys has the courage. That's why the people follows. Why Miles Guo is so persuasive and people believe in him, because he's not just telling the story or telling the secret. He's testifying what happens in China, what Chinese Communist Party is doing. And the people follows because they want to follow the people who has the courage and risk everything to all in. You, President Trump, Miles, all the same. That's why people trust, follow NFSC. I think that's all. I think what Miles stands for: telling the truth and put everything out there, fight for the freedom and the democracy for Chinese people.
I want to add one thing that's very important for people to keep in mind. This is the power of President Trump. President Trump's not a perfect person. Miles Guo's not a perfect person. It's their imperfections and the rising above that shows their greatness. President Trump, well, first Miles knew, because we talked about it a lot, Miles knew his life was always in jeopardy and his freedom was always in jeopardy. Remember, they had the entire national security state people, MSS people, I guess it is, Ministry of State Security, come over a couple of times and try to extradite him, even when the Attorney General of Trump's first term, Sessions, told the Chinese after the first failed attempt, don't ever try that again. They tried it again. This was how important. Miles always knew his freedom was in jeopardy. He always knew that he might end up in prison or might end up being taken back to China surreptitiously and disappeared, right? Mm-hmm. And his greatness is that he did not back off an inch. In fact, I would actually argue he got more intense about exposing the lies of Beijing and how they crush people. Trump's the same way. Trump came later because I don't think President Trump realized, remember, on the 10th anniversary is 11 days from now, President Trump coming down the golden escalator. He will tell you he didn't at the time understand what the deep state of the Chinese Communist Party, what they would do. It was only after we had the election stolen in 2020, and he realized with the pandemic and the election being stolen back to back, that there were great forces arraigned against him. And then when he got to Mar-a-Lago, he made a conscious decision, just like Miles. The greatness of these two individuals is in the profile and courage of making a conscious decision, that understanding that I may be imprisoned or assassinated, I've got to do this thing. And I've got to do this thing for my country and for my fellow citizens. That is very powerful. You see that very rarely. In fact, Kennedy wrote a book called Profiles in Courage. There is political courage. If I take this vote, maybe I'm voted out of office. If I do this, I'll be thrown out of this cabinet secretary. There are those moments of political courage, and we see that all the time. You don't see many examples of moral courage back to its very basis, where somebody knows in their heart that I am stepping into danger every day, and that danger is out there, and that danger could overwhelm me. I mean, Miles Guo has been rotting in a prison, and people should understand This is one of the nastiest prisons in the country. It's an intermittent holding prison for people on trial before they get sent to more formal prisons. But having been in Danbury, which is very tough and very old, is like a country club compared to where Miles is. Miles is held in one of the worst prisons in the country. And one of the reasons it's the worst prison, they try to break psychologically the prisoners there that are about to go to trial, right? They want to break them psychologically. So they're not prepared to really, it's very tough to see your lawyer, all that. Miles Guo always knew that that was potentially ahead of him because of the Chinese Communist Party and their reach. Also, assassination. And look, it was at Fox Hunt and everything they sent to try to track him down and try to track down the new federal state people, the whistleblower movement, all the different things we set up. Everybody's involved at the board level, et cetera, to come and get him. The same thing with Trump. Trump made a conscious decision to come back, understanding they were going to try to bankrupt him. They were going to try to bring up false charges. Remember, they found him guilty in a total kangaroo court of 32 felonies. He's 32 felonies, of which carries prison time, of which they wanted to send him to Rikers Island. Letitia James and these radicals before stopped. And he still got, under Jack Smith and these guys, still these federal charges, they wanted to come after him. He consciously made a decision. And that's how Miles and President Trump at a very high level are very similar. I don't think you can look in modern political history, and Lisa, and I'm a student of history and I've searched, I don't think you've seen any two individuals make that level of commitment to a cause that they knew in their hearts might lead, or probably would lead eventually, to their own personal and physical destruction. That's true heroism. That's how you rise above your ordinary self with all your imperfections, as all of us have, to true greatness, and will be remembered in history as great men.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah. So I want to share with you, Miles told us always he remembered one of the cellmates he had back in 1989 after he was arrested for supporting the students. And he shared this story on live stream more than once with us. It was a young boy, a virgin boy, that was charged of raping, but is a virgin. So, and he was short of 18 years old, and he was electrified every day, a dozen of times. And he never yielded, and he was actually executed in front of Miles' school, just meters away from him. And Miles watched how he was killed, brutally executed by the CCP. And before he was executed, he yelled repeatedly. He said the Chinese people are the driest tinder and ready to be ignited, was just that little spark. And that little spark is people like Miles, like you, like President Trump. Leadership, inspiration, and action. And I see this nation, and I see the nation of China are in action because of you and because of the NFSC. So I really want to say thank you from bottom of our heart on behalf of all the fellow fighters, from people who are supporting and watching this live stream, whether wherever they are. And I wanted to say a heartfelt thank you to you and for all the fight that you have done so far and bring us to this far along the fight with the CCP. So thank you.
Thank you. I just want to make a comment on that time in Miles's life, as we spent time together, and I learned his life story and the family and all that. That was a major inflection point for Miles, because Miles up until that time wasn't particularly political. Miles would tell you he was kind of a wild man. He was a very wild youth, right? Yeah. And he didn't really think politically, because he said not many people really thought politically. It's what those young students did when he was put into the prison. There was he had a couple of older mentors that actually had him realize that Miles, how smart he is, because Miles must have an IQ of 180. He's one of the smartest individuals I've ever met. And I've gone to look to the best schools, Harvard, worked at Goldman Sachs, at the Pentagon. I've worked with the smartest people in this country. Miles had extraordinary intellectual capability. And he said, but he had never applied it. And this individual, this older guy, was a little bit like a mentor and got Miles to read and to think. And then Miles saw the inhumane treatment and why people were up there. I remember Miles's brother also was killed during that time. And he saw the prisoners, like you said, this young boy, but many prisoners in these horrific prison conditions where they were trying to break people being executed. And that was really, I think, the cathartic moment that Miles's life changed to a large extent, right? That it became that always became something that stuck with him of the brutality of the CCP and how it could turn against you and how it could turn against ordinary citizens. I mean, today when you guys are describing what happened at Tiananmen in the massacre, and with the footage last night, it's almost hard to comprehend when you look back over it. What's really hard to comprehend, Ava, is the great point you brought up, which is, and Chris Finton brought up, which is, how is this in the story not known by everybody? Not in modern times, the Nazis, the Bolsheviks, the Japanese and imperial thing, nobody took 10, 20, 30,000 innocent civilians, and particularly young people, and just gunned them down, their own people gunning them down. It's so stunning to think about the scale of the massacre and how the fact it's totally been suppressed. Not just the Chinese people don't know it, but the people in the West don't know it. In fact, you sit there and think when you see it, how can J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs and Booz Allen and McKinsey and Microsoft and Apple, how could these companies be in business with a government that did that? They wouldn't do it to any other government in the world. Why is it? And it raises the question of what the West, what the CCP sells the West about La Beijing and their propaganda, because no other people on earth with these giant corporations with shareholder responsibility and being so woke ever be associated with a government that turned its own troops of the same age onto innocent protesters.
Yes.
And what were the big asks? What were the protests? What were their big ask? We want some freedom. We want some liberty, maybe democracy. These were not huge, these were not huge asks.
Yes.
They were pretty fundamental to what people in the West, and quite frankly, even in Latin America and India, take for granted as the air they breathe. This is what's so stunning. And the world's silence about it and looking the other way, because you didn't see BBC and ABC and NBC. Yes, they went back to and try to investigate. Nancy Pelosi very much, went back on the 5th anniversary, and she was almost arrested, because there was a time when Nancy Pelosi, who's terrible today, but she was one of the fire breathers about Tiananmen, right? How did the world not make it a condition for the Chinese Communist Party to be accepted among the nations of the earth, to have any investment, any commerce, anything, that the people account responsible for that? You had to have a Nuremberg trial. They had to be put on trial, and to be blunt, they should have been executed in public executions for the brutality of this massacre. And I do think that we got to continue using the word massacre every time that we talk about it. And Miles is fundamental in this. About Miles said, hey, look, everybody focuses on Tiananmen, but during May, it popped up all over the country. You had a nation in revolt led by young people and students principally, but others too, that wanted democracy, that wanted liberty, and wanted freedom. So it's an incredible story. And every year when we think about this, and particularly since Miles chose this date for a reason.
Yes.
Absolutely. We had every different alternative we talked about. And Miles said at the very beginning, when he first came to me about New Federal State, which I absolutely loved. We had kind of kicked around some things about government and exile, things like that. And I said, well, when did we do this? He said, there's only one date. He says it has to be Tiananmen. And we got to start on the evening before here in the United States, because we have to honor those that died by actually starting everything we do at essentially dawn in Beijing. So that's how important the Tiananmen massacre was to the formation of Miles Guo.
Right, and that's absolutely, that's God's mission, and that's we try to honor all these people who lost their lives, and I think that's a holy date, June 4th.
Holy date, yes.
Absolutely. And the realization, it not just to, like I always say, like, for the American people today are just like the Chinese students on the Tiananmen Square in 1989. And we are speeding towards the eve of June 4th. So the realization, and one of the reasons why we're here is not just to commemorate the big massacre. And that's why, like, I think you brought up a really good point about media. If there were war rooms, if there were Getter, if there were President Trump, we could have stopped the massacre. But now, like, if you look at the tactics, it's been 36 years, and you mentioned about like we couldn't even find any, pictures, many footage. I remember yesterday you asked me for the CCTV footage. There's none, right? Nobody's talking about it except for a few. And the realization here is that the CCP never changed, and it cannot be trusted. That's the biggest lesson we learned, and those students lost their lives to learn this. That the tactic they use, like a couple hours before the massacre, like they're still putting on TV, like Li Peng is talking to the student leaders, and it seems like they're gonna strike a deal, and 2 hours later they got run over by tanks, right? So it's exactly the same tactic they used right now and in 2019 when Liu He came over and talked to Trump, and at the same time released the virus in Wuhan and killed 1 million American people, and they've also stolen the election from you guys. And right now, like just 7 hours ago, President Trump just posted on Truth Social saying that it's very hard to make a deal with President Xi because like they never honor their deal, right? The only thing they're trying to do is to stall the time. They believe Xi Jinping firmly believe this is from our intel internally that firmly believes President Trump gonna maybe assassinated or lose power in 2 years, and he's been ready. He's been preparing for that, and he's been spreading lies as well about like how President Trump wanted to do a deal, like want to call Xi Jinping every single day, and it becomes a joke because like in China, there's a ringtone about it called President Trump, like Xi Jinping, please call me, right? So so the tactics, sir, is exactly the same. Do you agree?
I agree. I definitely agree. And it's we have to be more cunning and tougher. President Trump's got a broad range of responsibilities. One is to keep the world from devolving into a third world war. The one thing Miles taught me very early on about the CCP, that you got to remember, as a Westerner, I went to Asia as a young man, naval officer from Virginia, because I always was attracted to Asia, about America and the Pacific in World War II, but particularly China. And this is something that for Chinese nationals or Chinese citizens, it may be hard to understand. And it's one of the ways the Chinese Communist Party can manipulate and have people work for them. In the West, the mythical nature of China, its history, what's been achieved, its civilization is for some people, like the Boston Clippers, the people, the sailing thing, the missionaries, people like myself, young people, that there is a great gravitational pull to this kind of, the concept of the Middle Kingdom, the concept that this China is so big compared to the rest of the world. And the CCP manipulates that. The CCP uses this. This is why so many world leaders, this is why so many business executives, this is so many China is so big to them, and then the CCP is really the controlling factor, and they use that. You can see this in Ava mentioned, when the United States, essentially State Department, convinced everybody in the government to turn over China to essentially a small group of bandits, right? That had some followers, but really a small group of bandits that had used and manipulated to have the Kuomintang army fight Japan and take horrendous casualties. They didn't really fight. The Chinese people lost 35 million people, which nobody ever talks about, in World War II. But the manipulation prospects, because they're totally demonic. They don't play by the rules of human society. Remember, China forever, you didn't need strong central governments, or you had the imperial power, because the Chinese people were really about family, about community, and about clan. So you had an entire integrated social network that the government was just some guys coming down to steal your grain. But the Chinese Communist Party has used to manipulate that, and to really take the kind of mythical power of, almost like the Lord of the Rings, the power of the ring, to attract people and to manipulate them, that thinking that you're going to be a part of this, you're going to get tremendous wealth, you're going to get tremendous access, while they have over 70 years really if you think about it, 90,000 people, of which probably 5,000 make a difference. And Miles would always talk about this, that it's only a handful of people in the Chinese Communist Party, in those 4 or 5 factions controlled by families, that really control the entire thing. And this is what I think we have to push out every day, because the 5,000, they don't care if a couple of 100 million Chinese right now starve during some trade war. They don't care. I mean, the famous thing is to let them eat grass for 3. They can eat grass for 3 years. Mao Zedong used to talk about nuclear warfare, and he said, "Look, if the West hits us with their nuclear weapons, what are we going to lose? 300 or 400 million people." This is when China was under just right at a billion. He says, 300 or 400 million people doesn't matter. The Chinese people will procreate, and we'll be back. So it's this inhumanity for Lao Beijing and their manipulative power, and not having any guardrails of what we consider the Cartesian, not just the Judeo-Christian West, but kind of the Cartesian way that the rest of humanity deals with each other, that makes them so lethal, so dangerous, and so powerful. And Miles would go over this over and over again. They are not playing by the rules of the West. They're not playing by the rules that you've grown up with. They're not playing by the rules that the Chinese people have grown up with. This is an entity that's been passed down now for what, 70 or 80 years, that's lethal, and most lethal to the Chinese people. And if you don't deal with them in the same level of cunning, in the same level of intensity and urgency, you're never going to beat them. And I think that's why on the 5th anniversary, it's very important for us to think about the lessons that Miles Guo taught us.
100%. You captured so wonderful. And I want to say, you described a cult, an ideology, an actual group of people that was funded, dates back in 1921, established in Shanghai, the Communist Party, by the Soviet Union. And then Mao took it, grew it into something we see today. Whether we want to call it Chinese Communist Party, or whether we call it, the extreme left Democrat Party, or whatever party in whatever nation, they all have commonality, which is a total disregard and discard for humanity, fairness, and justice. And Easel of Mao, this is actually in the Little Red Mao book. This is what Mao's words. He said, "To struggle with the heaven is endless joy. To struggle with the earth is endless joy. To struggle with people is endless of joy." So this, I don't know, even God, Satan, anyone on its way, they're going to bulldoze it over, and then they want to rule the world. Nothing will stop them. And this is this kind of a group that we are fighting against. So yes, we have to up our games. But I do notice you're very, very astute, because you noticed on a day like this, a tragic day, that world media should be talking, but no one other than Warren and us are talking. So, but let's pay attention. What's today's headline? You covered in War Room this morning. Steve, what is it? Around the world and the United States. Did you notice what it is?
Yes. Well, first off, it's about Putin and Ukraine, but it's most importantly is about Xi's call. Everybody's talking about Xi's call with President Trump.
Yeah, and there's 2 more. Okay, especially you have to see what's going on inside the United States. The top pushed, amplified news is Elon Musk's criticism on Trump. Okay, so think about what CCP does the best. They sow discord. Okay, they fanning the division, and then they fueling the hatred. So CCP internally has already made the order. This is strictly from the intel, from just a fresh intel coming from the new federal state of China. They will use any channel they can control, whether domestically in China or internationally, TikTok, social media, X, whatever. They pumping this news, which is saying Elon Musk is opposed Donald Trump. Elon Musk had a huge break with Donald Trump. So they emphasize on that. And they emphasize on the personal divide. Right now, I can tell, I don't believe, these 2 individuals actually appreciating each other for what they've done in the first, couple months of this administration. I don't think they're foes. But the media has created this environment, and soon enough, even now, this is not reflecting the reality. It will become, and who wins? Chinese Communist Party. Okay, this is what they want America people to fight and fueling. This is what they are playbook in playing right now. And this is just one news. But what happened the other one? Capture, you covered it again. The newspaper, you hold it on. It's South Korea. Guess what? Okay, so Miles Guo on live streaming told us 3 years ago, the CCP control South Korea 100%.
Yes.
He didn't say 99%. He said 100%.
100%.
And 2 weeks ago, Miles Guo phoned us and told us one question that his lawyer asked him. And they asked him who is going to win in the South Korea coming president election. Guess what Miles Guo, his answer was? And
the Democratic Party, Lee, was going to win.
Here you go. Why? And Miles on the phone told us he knew Lee personally.
Yeah.
Okay. He knew Lee is anti-America and he is 100% communists, like the Brazil Lula. So nothing that's happening on the world stage is surprise.
No, it's that you mentioned it, Ava. It was Miles years ago that told me about when he recommended unrestricted warfare. Said you must read that. Is that he said, don't underestimate the political warfare department of the CCP and how smart it is, and he used Korea as an example. Remember, in Taiwan, the same thing. In Hong Kong, the same thing. In Taiwan, Kuomintang, the Nationalist Party of Chiang Kai-shek, is essentially the party of the CCP there. Miles Guo personally, with his efforts, stopped Terry Guo, who he said he was the first to identify Terry Guo as a running dog at Foxconn, as a running dog for the CCP because of the business associations he got with the factories. And when Terry Guo announced, remember, he went into the thing, he was crying in the temple. Miles Guo goes, that's totally phony. He's the candidate of the CCP. And Miles's efforts defeated Terry Guo in the primary, which at the time when Terry Guo started, he had like an 80% approval rating. It was Miles bringing it up. And he said the Kuomintang is totally controlled by the CCP and the Democratic Party. This is when they didn't have power. He said they're going to be a problem because this is the CCP's political. They're going to take Korea with ballots, not bullets. And you saw the stealing and everything like that, which is what they try to do in 2020. So their political warfare operation is incredibly sophisticated. And Miles called it out to me years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. He said, watch South Korea. South Korea is the one they're really focused on and they've warped the young people. Remember, South Korea in the cultural side with K-pop at one time dominated, particularly East Asia's whole contemporary music scene and all of it. And he says, even with K-pop, they're going to get in and start to twist the young people with social media and what they're putting on social media that think that the CCP actually has benefits to them for more liberty and freedom, right? And that what they should do is draw closer to North Korea. If you think about what a bizarre world that is, where the CCP gives nobody any freedom, yet they're able to convince the young people of the culture in East Asia that is the most replicated from a pop music and, K-pop and all that, the lifestyle and social media. This shows you how sophisticated they are. And this shows you how we're going to have to start thinking like them to take them down.
And look, Elon had every right to question a United States president. But let me ask you, if Elon Musk does this in China, if he questioned Xi Jinping, what would happen to him?
Impossible. Listen, Elon Musk, this is where we had the falling out, is that Elon Musk, first off, in the first White House, would come to my office all the time, trying to get the same tax breaks he's arguing about now, because really why he's coming after Trump is he didn't get the EV electrical underwriting mandate, the battery, or anything like that. And President Trump at the time, we were getting at the Paris Accord. He says, no way. I'm not supporting. I think climate change a myth, a hoax. We're not going to support this. We're going to get Paris. So my thing to Elon in my first confrontation, I said, we're not doing any of this. And he was not happy about that, although he had not supported us in the 2016 campaign. In fact, he was a big supporter of the Democratic Party. And then cut to the whole Tesla situation. Elon is very, Tim Pool did a broadcast of the Tim Pool show a couple of years ago from Capitol Hill, but it's very rare. It's from Matt Gaetz's office. And this went super viral. I'm over there because Tim Pool only did it at his place in West Virginia. So I would go be a guest with Gates, myself, and Tim Pool. And the conversation got into somehow some mention of Elon Musk because Tim Pool's a huge fanboy. And a lot of these guys are huge fanboys. And I said, Elon Musk is just an agent of influence of the Chinese Communist Party. I said, you know, the Tesla joint venture, they own him lock, stock, and barrel. I said, when they had the 100th anniversary of the CCP, and remember, Miles and I, we had a whole, I think, all-day broadcast talking about all the horrors, how many hundreds of millions of Chinese they had killed. This was nothing to celebrate. This was something to condemn. Elon was he had all that happy talk of how wonderful they were and how much prosperity they brought the Chinese people. He was an agent of influence, and I said it over and over again on this broadcast. And even Matt Gaetz didn't realize it, and Tim Pool was like in shock, being a fanboy. That day, Elon, who was watching live, tweeted out immediately. He says, "I used to think Bannon was both brilliant and evil." He goes, "Now I just think he's evil." Right? And I went back with something, "Hey, dude, dude, you can say what you want. But listen, from the very beginning here with the letter, look, how did the letter come up in the early days after President Trump won of inviting Xi to the inauguration? Where did that come from? If you look at this, the entire time's been, you know, and here's where the inflection point for Elon was. When Elon demanded to see the top secret briefing from the Pentagon of the war plan against the Chinese Communist Party. The Pentagon, and think about it, there wasn't enough confidence in people there that they could go right to the president, given Elon's power at the time of getting rid of people. They leaked it to the New York Times. It was a page one story, never been refuted by anybody, that said both the uniformed armed services and the senior members of the Defense Department were not just uncomfortable. They were saying, hey, we know this guy's very involved with China, and it would be anybody with his involvement with the senior levels of the Chinese Communist Party in a business venture where all the intellectual property is given up in some joint venture, we would never be able to brief this guy at any classified level. When that broke, President Trump said, well, I'm sure Elon didn't ask for that. He would never ask for that. And we've seen the relationship devolve from then. But that, I think the driving force of it is the relationship with the Chinese Communist Party and them seeing that as being as disruption, because you're absolutely correct. They want to sow the seeds of disruption. Anywhere they go, they want to sow the seeds of disruption. And that's one of the things that Miles warned us about, that we always have to look behind the surface of events to get below about what's really going on.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes. Divide and conquer. And not to mention that you are still banned on X. But my feeling is,
well, first of all, hold it. Hey, not just banned on X. People know my love for Trump. People love me. No.
Yeah.
Well, I'm on Getter, so I don't need to be on X. But no, but think about it. I am the only civilian in the history of this country to ever be fully sanctioned by the Chinese Communist Party. I cannot have any associations with Chinese companies. I cannot travel to Hong Kong. I think if I try to go to Taiwan, it'd be an international incident. I haven't tried that yet, but it's in my back pocket. I can't go to mainland China. And people know, and particularly the CCP know, my great love for Shanghai. I was in there, basically lived there for over a year, in and out, as we had a company there. I fell in love with Shanghai. Absolutely. Hong Kong. London and Hong Kong are my two favorite cities in the world. I love Hong Kong. I'd always thought about maybe later in life, when I was a businessman, of retiring to Hong Kong. I absolutely love it. I love the city. I love the energy. I love the people. I love everything about it. I'm banned. I can never go back to Hong Kong. I can never go to Shanghai as long as this regime ends, because I'm fully sanctioned by them. And the Biden administration didn't do anything. They sanctioned Pompeo, Peter Navarro, and Matt Pottinger and myself all on the same day. And the Biden regime did nothing about it. Four prominent U.S. citizens, one who was a total civilian at the time, the other three were in the government. But this is how the CCP rolls. And if you don't punch back, if you just accept it, they're going to do more of it, because they think that they're so tied in with the business, with the financial community of the United States, the business. I mean, think about it. The skinny deal after Li He or Wang Xishan and Xi tore up the long deal in 2019, the skinny deal that we had, the skinny deal, which had a lot of good things that President Trump was trying to get done. But one of the central things, the reason the business community wanted it, it opened up Chinese insurance and finance and banking to the West. Why? Because they need a bailout. The insurance companies are upside down. The business insurance companies are upside down. The banks are upside down. Why? because the Chinese Communist Party lies to everybody. The real estate's there upside down. I mean, if you think about Lao Baixing for a second, they're the most decent people on earth. They say 50 to 60% of their incomes are saved. One of the reasons China can't transform from an export economy to a consumer economy is the Chinese people, Lao Baixing, are just not going to spend that much money. Why? They don't trust the Chinese Communist Party. There's no Social Security. There's no Medicaid. There's no Medicare. Now that you only have one child, or you had for decades, there's no extended family network like in the old days. There's nothing for the Chinese to take care of them in old age. And so they're sitting there with no social safety net in a government that will lie to you and try to steal any wealth you have. Of course, you're going to husband your resources as much as possible. What did they do? They enticed them to buy into real estate, which is now, because of all the scams and cons and the Chinese Communist Party skimming 10 and 20% off the top, most of this real estate is at 50 cents on the dollar. So the one time they actually invested, they got ripped off. And now they can't. Now the Chinese Communist Party needs the West to bail it out. And what do you see? You see the biggest banks in the world, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, the biggest insurance companies, they all want to come and put their nose in the trough like a bunch of pigs to basically have access to old 100 names who saves 50 or 60%, and they'll bail out the Chinese Communist Party. This is like the bailout of 2008 of the financial and political elite in the United States. This is what it is. Now, I hope, and I'm adamant about, we can never allow, even in a trade deal, that to happen, because we can't bail out the Chinese Communist Party. They're going to have to live with the consequences of screwing the Lao Baixing.
Yes, absolutely. I think, Steve, you are 100% right. The Chinese Communist Party, as Ava this morning laid out very well, they only have a couple tactics, lie, propaganda, infiltration, and manufacturing the hatred between the people, or between the enemies within. So that's what they are used, because they use this tactics cross the border of China. Now, if we are looking at today in the U.S., the political polarization and also the race tension and all this happening in the U.S., it's the media, it's the propaganda push all this. That's why when the U.S. has the weakness, they can attack. And unfortunately, there are so many enablers and people help Chinese Communist Party to weakening the American. That's why they were able to influence the U.S. policy, pro-CCP. We were talking about Harvard, the Harvard policy, Harvard Ash Center. They have this, this morning you mentioned, the 95% of approval rating. That's from their report, from Harvard report. They are helping the Chinese Communist Party while influence the youth in this country. So I think today we are doing this show. We want to warn the American people. We want to let them know this country is in the dark. Just like the CCP doing the massacre at the night in Tiananmen Square. They are doing all the evil behaviors in the darkest night because they don't want people to know.
I do think if you look at the polling, and this is one of the things, remember, the best and most important lesson that Miles Guo brought to the West, with so many other great lessons he had for us, was you have to bifurcate the CCP from China and the Chinese people, because you guys mix it all up. And if you notice in the nomenclature today, particularly on Capitol Hill, the CCP, their committees on the CCP, their focus on the CCP, and this is where the Committee on the Present Danger, the New Federal States, some of the organizations I'm focused on, one of the things is to make sure we always identify that's the Chinese Communist Party. The one thing, so I think people, I think you look at polling, people now overwhelmingly say that the issue is China and our relationship with China, and that's the biggest security threat. That is huge. Just in a couple of years, that is huge, because before Miles Guo came to the West, and I was on this, that was at 5%. Remember, people were sold that the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese were our allies, and we're going to be a co-prosperity sphere, and they were maybe a peer competitor. That was it. The brutality was never said. Now, two things I don't think Americans are as they waken to the threat of the Chinese Communist Party. The one thing, and this is so important for us in this next year, new federal state, the urgency of the moment. that things are accelerating at an accelerating rate. And Miles told us this would happen. Events are moving and moving quickly. Number one, the CCP understands. Ava said they're a paper tiger. They do understand to a degree they are a paper tiger. Particularly, they've got a totally jerry-rigged economy that can't go on forever. Eventually, they're going to have to pay a big price for accountability. Mm-hmm. So there's an urgency at the moment. The other thing that we haven't done yet, that Miles was really the first to actually drill down, and this is one of the reasons I had the Epoch Times. I did an hour on their interview last week, and I had him on for a special at 6 o'clock for an entire hour, is the brutality of in the live organ harvesting. Like, who would do that? What people would do this to their fellow countrymen? Miles Guo would always be talking about the CCP, besides their political, because they're not communists, they're actually the maximum capitalist, almost an autocracy to take all the wealth generated by the Chinese people. But that doesn't make them the worst in history. What makes them the worst in history is the scale of the murder and destruction and really agony of their own people. And he was very specific. He said, look, there's no nation on earth that's ever had its leadership cadre kill 1 billion people. And I would go, how do you get to 1 billion people? And Miles had the math worked out. Number one, more so than even Stephen Moshe and some of the people that have followed this for years, and I think are brilliant. I think Moshe, what Moshe's done in Outsiders about the forced abortions. Miles would sit there and walk you through the math. He said, look, it's at least 450 to 500 million in the one-child policies. Forced abortions, which are essentially murder. 80% of those are young Chinese girls. This is why you have this huge mismatch and this huge cultural problem of too many young men. It's not 50-50 as God always intended. And if you just randomly do it, it's real 50-50. You're disconnected. It's one of the reasons that sex trafficking is so big in China. Nobody wants to talk about it, but it does, because there's just not enough women. Why? They've killed all the Chinese babies, the female babies. That's 500 million. Then Miles goes back to when the CCP took over. He talks in detail about the Great Leap Forward, an absolutely radical idea of Mao to basically make China an advanced industrial economy in just 5 years by the collectivization of the peasants in the countryside, but also forced labor to force them in here. It was a total and complete debacle and almost brought Mao down. Miles goes through his calculation. It's 100 to 200 million dead there from starvation and famine and basically putting into camps, these collectivization farms were essentially concentration camps where people just died. Then he goes into the Cultural Revolution. Miles has very compelling numbers that talks about 250 million people dying then, right? You're at 1 billion right there before you even get to the 1980s, 1990s, what they've done in the interim with all the camps and disappearing people and the Uyghurs and the underground house Christians and the underground Catholics and everything. This is the most murderous regime in human history. And yet the mainstream media, the top brands in the world from Paris and Milan, the media all run there, the banks, and I'm talking JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, Booz Allen, Apple, all the great companies in Germany, all the high fashion. High fashion has lived for the last 25 years off of their sales in China. They admit that the elite princelings and that very thin crust of upper society that can spend anything on clothes and fashion and everything is that they can spend it and not worry about it because they steal it from Lao Beijing. They steal it from the people. So this is the great outrage and the most murderous dictatorship in the way they kind of conceal it, but also force people to deal with it. And you're going to have to deal with it on our terms, the CCP's terms. And if that's a problem, then don't come. But if you're going to come, it can't be a problem. And this is the great sin of the West, that our elites, look at Harvard. Harvard's a training ground. It's called the party school by the cadres in Beijing. They've taken my alma mater, which at one time was the backbone of kind of American patriotism during the Revolution and the Civil War, and totally turned it into a factory of dissent and, as you said, sowing discord. Because why? The Chinese Communist Party's in there. And Harvard's saying today they don't know if they can make it financially without government assistance if we throw out all the students that are there at Harvard that are Chinese nationals. So Every institution has been corrupted. As Miles told us, they will corrupt every institution they touch, because that's what they're in the business of doing, of corrupting institutions and corrupting individuals associated with those institutions.
That's why I think even Satan should be terrified, because they're dealing with the Chinese Communist Party. The reason why I brought Elon is because I think that's the greatness of the democracy. Because Elon would never be able to question Xi Jinping in China, because he will be put in jail, like what happened to Miles. Okay, so Elon would never afford that in China, communist China. However, this is exactly what the CCP is so calculative and so cunning. They're using your greatness and turning it against you. So think about it. I have no doubt Elon Musk or many other people who worked in Wall Street or even in Silicon Valley are patriots. They love America. Okay, let's think about that. They love the country. They love the fellow countrymen. I have no doubt. I don't want to question that. However, they are business partners with the CCP, and CCP pumping sow discord every single day, okay, and create division every single day, and using lies, rumors to basically fueling the hatred. They divide you. If United States are stronger, you are the #1 superpower in the world. If they can cut you half, okay, and divide your forces into two, and then they cut even half further, divide it even to a smallest factionist list, and allow you internally fighting faction, and they are laughing at you, because why? Doesn't matter how many pieces they slice you, they want to take you all. So I think the sense of urgency for all of you have a reason to unite is, think about 2019, what happened. Why CCP chose to start the massacre in the 11th hour on June 3rd, because it's dark. Nobody can see it. Nobody knows what's happened, because most of the people are sleeping. America is in that 11th hour on Tiananmen Square that day. American has a total darkness. Think about 2019. After in May 2019, they reject your trade deal. What they did, they released virus. They hold off your PPE. Okay, American cannot buy PPE anywhere else. Even 3M is not allowed. 3M factory in China is not allowed to export the American company made mask to America. Think about what they cut off for you that time. So let me ask you, Steve, if which they have thousands of virus strains ready to release in the next little while, they're just waiting for the perfect timing. They have a full intention to do that, to destroy America. Let me ask you, next time, if they want to release that, what kind of thing they will cut you off on? What about cyber? They have the ability today. If they want to cut you and let you black out the entire country, they can do it. It doesn't take much effort at all. If they want to cut you on your transportation, they have done it. Actually, they can ground your plane very easily. Is there anything else? Does American understand the sense of urgency to folks see the only one enemy of you, of this entire nation? What doesn't matter what's your faction, what's your corporatists, or whether you're Wall Street or you're Silicon Valley. This is a challenge ever before humanity faced, and you are the leader of this darkness, and War Room shines the light to the entire world.
No, that's very powerful, Ava. And particularly, look, we've been warned about this. The FBI, which has done a terrible job about this, Chris Wray, in his exit interview with 60 Minutes, they asked him, what's the #1 threat facing this country? He says the existential threat is the Chinese Communist Party and infiltration. And then he dropped the bomb that our entire logistics system, our entire electrical system, our entire communication system, right, our entire transportation system, everything has monitors and kill switches embedded in technology we bought from the Chinese Communist Party over the last 30 years since we shipped all the American technology out of here. So it is frightening, the scale of it. And you're right. People on Capitol Hill, there are certain elements that are awakening to this, but they're not awakening to the urgency of it. The urgency is it has to be dealt with now. We can't kick the can down. It can't be next year. Can't be the year after it. If it's not dealt with now, we're going to get overwhelmed by this by how the system has been subverted, and quite frankly, with fellow travelers in the United States that are making money off it. We got to be blunt about this. There are people guilty of treason today that understand what they're doing with the Chinese Communist Party, and they're taking money. They're making more money than they ever made, and they're selling out their country, and they're selling out their countrymen.
Yeah, I think, Steve, what you just said and manifested to our audience exact reason why you are the only American person Wang Qishan talk about. He doesn't talk about any other American person because he understands that you love Chinese people. You have deep understanding about Chinese people, Chinese culture, and the Chinese Communist Party, and you know exactly what they're doing right now. Right now, internally, she is spreading rumors and lies inside the party that Trump is finished. And on national, propaganda levels, like you can see on the news, like they're playing victims and saying America is the bully on the trade talk and trade deal. And also, like himself, like he's fanning the flames of conflicts, in Ukraine, between Russia, like the closed door talk with Putin for 3 days. He's encouraging Putin to continue the war, deepen the war, and also like Putin, I think later he probably gonna not just attack Ukraine, but also attack the Scandinavian, the Nordic countries. And also we talk about the CCP, and Xi Jinping is the black hand behind all these countries, all anti-Semitism, like all these countries. He's very happy with the weapons in Pakistan. He's gonna give more weapons. The arms proliferation is really bad in Syria, in Yemen, in Houthi, Lebanon, yes. And also, like one thing you mentioned very importantly is the financial system, because like the petrodollar system is your superpower. It's what makes America #1 in the past like 100 years. But like now, Xi Jinping is waiting for the time not just to fan the flames of conflict. We're heading towards World War III and nuclear wars, and also like releasing the virus. And also, Xi Jinping is ready. Like you look at the BRICS, he's working with countries. He's ready to launch a new payment system and stable.
Not working. He's leading the effort. This is why Lula. Yeah. This is why Lula went to the 3-day confab they had over the 80th memorial. Lula was there the entire time because it's Brazil, Russia, China. Those are the three key. India's kind of out being an ally of ours, and they also not. India's at loggerheads, obviously strategically with the Chinese Communist Party, and South Africa doesn't count. But and of course they've got more sub-Saharan African countries. But the three, Brazil, Russia, China, they had a 3-day meeting specifically about what's going to happen in Rio. And they're not going to destroy the US dollar, but man, they've got I tell people, they just took Korea by ballots, okay? They stole an election, but they are being cheered on the front page of the Wall Street Journal and Financial Times of London as, these people are going to unify Korea. That's the Chinese Communist Party. Well, 20 years ago, if you said that a party backed by the CCP would actually win an election, openly embracing the CCP in North Korea and Korea, people would say, you're crazy. That's ridiculous. The dumbest thing I ever heard. Hey, today we're living with the consequences of that. And so people that laugh off what Xi and the Chinese Communist Party is thinking about the dollar's reserve currency, don't laugh, because they got a plan that's in motion. It's not going to happen immediately. But hey, the fall of Korea didn't happen immediately either. But they think long term, and they act short term. And so people, this is why my point, this is another issue of the sense of urgency.
You remember, Steve, like the CCP has been lying to the world about the gold reserve. They have 32,000 tons of gold. That's why, like, when the U.S., like, yes, United States and UK is talking, like, #1 term is to ask UK not to reserve gold for the CCP. It's very bad, and I think all these proxy wars, like all the conversations happening, like I think essentially it's gonna be the war between the CCP and United States. It's gonna come to that end, and it's gonna happen between 2028.
2027, 2028. Guys, thank you so much for letting me be with you guys for the hour with our annual commemoration of this. And thank you for being on the show last night. You're also gonna be back at 5 o'clock. Yeah. We're going to even do more. So we got a lot more to go through. And we need to get you guys on more during the regular shows. I think we're going to announce every Tuesday, at least for the second half of the Tuesday evening show. We're going to do something special about New Federal State, and particularly about this issue of urgency. We're going to have you guys obviously on during the week when there's breaking news. But, you know, President Trump put up a tweet, Truth Social earlier today, that he had a call with Putin, and it didn't go well. He was up front. He said Putin told him, the peace negotiations are really not going to happen right now, number one. And he said, we're going to hit back hard on what happened. President Trump took that Truth Social down just as I was coming on when Jack Posobiec went live. So we'll find out. But we're getting inexorably drawn into a third world war on the Eurasian landmass with some pretty tough hombres in Beijing and Moscow and Tehran. And we got to really, really, really have our act together here. So I thank you for having me on this day that we commemorate the heroism of Miles Guo, the heroism of the Chinese people, Lao Beijing, and the efforts of New Federal State of China of taking the teachings of Miles Guo and transmit it to Lao Beijing and assist Lao Beijing in basically setting things right in mainland China and winning their freedom and their liberty.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Guys, I'll see you at 5 o'clock.
Yeah,
Thank
see you
you.
at 5.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
还有刚想说那个 economy。
That's okay.
Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. 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 Take down the 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 CCP. 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 Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP.
Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. Let me tell you what I've been through, baby. Lived a life that was hella unfair. Seen things that been driving me crazy. In a country where the leaders don't care. Didn't think we had the courage to change it. Tore it down and they weren't prepared. Everything that they kept us from saying. Now we talking and they better be scared. Take from us. Tell us what and who to love. Swear I finally had enough. It's time to rise above. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Communism's dead to me because it killed our families. The CCP.
Communism's hard for me to give a f. Try to tell them and they try to keep it on the hush. Middle finger up, turn into a fist. They wanna keep the poor so they never rich. If you wanna see the future, look into the past. Been a century of silence, we gon' take it back. I'm just stating facts, tell you how it is. Ain't no way to change if we don't resist.
Take from us. Tell us what and who to love. Swear I finally had enough. It's time to rise above. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Communism's dead to me because it killed our families. The CCP.
这是你我维护正义的必须，这是你我维护正义的必须。
Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Communism's dead to me because it killed our families. The CCP.
你完了，共产党！你完了，共产党！你完了，共产党！